Awesome. So I would like to welcome everyone to MTRI's first summer seminar of 2022. Each week in July and August, we'll be hosting a talk on the biodiversity and conservation of Gasboek, or Southwest Nova Scotia. My name is Morgan Snare, and I am a summer research assistant here at the Mersey-Tobiatic Research Institute. But before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that MTRI is in, and we are meeting from Gasboek, one of the 7 districts of Mi'kma'ki, homeland of the Mi'kmaq people. We acknowledge the treaties of peace and friendship, and we thank the Mi'kmaq people for their generosity in sharing their land with us. MTRI is a research-based nonprofit nestled in Southwest Nova Scotia near Kedzie National Park and Historic Site, and within the Southwest Nova Scotia Biosphere Reserve. Our mission is to promote, conserve, and sustain biodiversity in Gasboek and beyond. Tonight, I am very pleased to introduce Hughstin Grimshaw-Surette from the Nova Scotia Invasive Species Council and Cole Vail, a student researcher at Dalhousie University and MTRI, for their presentation on the invasive species Dog-Strangling Vine. Next, I will hand the seminar over to Hughstin and Cole, but I would like to remind everyone to please keep your mics muted, and if you have any questions during the talk, please type them in the chat window or wait until the question period at the end. So Hughstin and Cole, you can take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that introduction, as well as thank you for the invitation to speaking today. So I'm just going to get this PowerPoint shared. Screen. There we go. All right. So basically the way how this presentation is going to work is that I will be presenting the majority of it, talking about Nova Scotia Invasive Species Council. And then I'll talk about the Dog-Strangling Vine project and what we've been doing in 2022. But Cole will also chime in as well and talk about what he did when he was the invasive plant field technician back in 2021. So he'll talk about the project during that year. Oh, you can, okay. Yeah, so I guess with that, I was just looking at the chat there. Yeah, so with that, I'm going to get started. So Dog-Strangling Vine in Kentville, Nova Scotia, a threat to biodiversity in the monarch butterfly. So first, I want to talk about Nova Scotia Invasive Species Council. So we're a provincial chapter of the Canadian Council on Invasive Species, and it's our goal to raise awareness and promote coordinated response to the threat of invasive species in Nova Scotia. So we have 3 main working groups, this being research, mapping and monitoring, as well as community engagement and communication. So those are our 3 main working groups that we focus on talking about invasive species here in Nova Scotia. So first off, what is an invasive species? I'm sure most of you know what invasive species is, but it's an invasive species is any organism that is non-native, that is able to spread rapidly through the habitat that it is established in, and also causes harm, whether this be to biodiversity, or other ecosystem functions, or possibly to infrastructure, or creating costly aspects to different economical viewpoints, but also to human health. And so how do they move, and how do they get into ecosystems in the first place? So one of the common ways is through planting in gardens. So you have a yeah, can't sorry for this yeah. Yeah, so the common method is through planting gardens. So horticulturists have brought plants to North America as ornamental sorry, just 1 second. Okay. So yeah, it's through planting through gardens to ornamental plant species, as well as releasing unwanted pets. So a good example of this is goldfish. So if you have a pet species that you do not want anymore, as you can't keep care of it for any longer and you release into the wild. This can pose a particular issue for invasive for the ecosystem. Similarly, dumping aquarium plants into an ecosystem. This can also introduce invasive species, introducing new game species for hunting and angling. And then you also have commercial wood imports. So this is the transportation of wood between different areas and regions, which invasive species can tag along with and move to different areas. Then also you have shipping. So invasive species can tag along as hitchhikers on large cargo vessels, whether it be above deck or also along hulls or in ship ballasts, and then get transported to new areas. So once they get into an ecosystem, they can have a significant impact on it. And so it's widely accepted that invasive species are a huge threat to biodiversity worldwide. In Canada, more than 20% of our species at risk are threatened with extinction by invasive species. Invasive species do this by predating on native species and taking their resources, so creating more competition pressures, whether this be for food or for space. It can also result in soil degradation and erosion, as well as degrading water quality and habitat. Invasive species can also bring in new diseases, which can have adverse health effects on humans as well as animals and plants. They can also have significant impacts on infrastructure, which can be quite costly. And from an economical viewpoint, they can have significant impacts on forestry sectors, agricultural sectors, fishing sectors, as well as recreational activities. So needless to say, they can have a significant impact on the ecosystem that they get introduced into. So how do we get rid of invasive species? Well, the first thing we can do is through prevention. So preventing the invasive species from getting into the ecosystem in the first place. That's obviously the best method, but that's not always successful. Early detection and rapid response are another great method. And so this requires citizen science and constantly monitoring ecosystems to see when invasive species first appear, and then rapidly using some form to remove them from the area. As the longer they stay in a particular area, the more of a difficulty they are to remove. And finally, there is management. So once you have an established invasive species in an ecosystem, management practices need to be implemented to remove it, with the end goal either to be fully eradicating the species from the area, or in some cases where eradication may not be possible, at least controlling the spread so it doesn't spread to new areas. So what do we do here at Nova Scotia Invasive Species Council? Well, we encourage changes in behavior to lessen the impact of invasive species. So this is done through several programs. So first we have the Clean, Drain, Dry. And so this targets boats as well as water recreational activities to clean them before and after going into a lake or other types of water systems to prevent the spread of invasive species. So some invasive species, such as types of mollusks, will attach themselves to the hulls of boats, so to clean those off, so you're not spreading them to other areas, as well as fragments of plants can also be introduced that way. We have the Don't Let It Loose program. So this is related to pets. So not letting pets out into the ecosystem. So what I was talking about earlier there. And so this talks about different alternative methods and to encourage people not to release their pets. And we also have the Play, Clean, Go. And so with this program, it's focused on hiking and activities like that. So when you go for a hike, to make sure to clean off your shoes as well as other clothing items, as well as afterwards, so that you're not spreading invasive species into that area. So this would include brushing off your boots to remove any seeds that may be lodged in your treads, as well as brushing off clothing. We also have a program in regards to firewood. So this is keeping, which is called Buy Local, Burn Local. And so this is the idea that if you go camping into a particular area, you're not bringing the firewood with you. Instead, you buy local firewood, so you're not transporting any potential forestry pests with you. Then we also have the Plant-Wise program. This program hasn't been implemented yet. It's currently in works. And so the idea behind this program is to talk with plant nurseries and provide them with information so that they can provide it to the public about what type of plant species you should be planting in your garden and to avoid invasive plant species. Okay, so with that, I'm going to move on now and talk about the Dog-Strangling Vine project. And so what everyone I came here to listen to. And so Dog-Strangling Vine gets its name not from the fact that it strangles dogs. So you don't have to worry about that. They don't strangle dogs, but they definitely do strangle vegetation. And so for some key characteristics of this plant species is it is a vine, so it has a twining nature and will twine around plant species as well as other objects to gain height. It has opposite leaves that are wider, more oval shape at the base when they become more narrow at the top. And these leaves also have this glossiness to them. So that's kind of another diagnostic feature of this plant. It also has very interesting flowers. They're almost like a star shaped. And the two species have two different colored flowers. So you've got the pale swallowwort, which has pale flowers, a little bit more of on the pinkish color shown in this image here. But there's also black swallowwort flowers. And so these are much darker, more darker purple to a black coloration. And so those are the difference there between the two species that make up Dog-Strangling Vine. And so Dog-Strangling Vine got here to North America from Ukraine by horticulturalists. They were used to be as vines in public and recreational gardens. So they were introduced as a garden ornamental plant, and then they escaped into surrounding habitat. They are primarily spread through natural processes such as wind dispersal. So these guys produce a lot of seeds, and these seeds have hair-like tufts on them that allows them to be wind dispersed up to around 100 meters. So they get a good range there in terms of dispersal. So what happens when they get into an ecosystem? Well, one thing is they're able to outcompete native plants for space as well as for resources. This sequentially reduces biodiversity by creating a monoculture of this thick, dense vines. In addition, as well, they have a potential threat to the endangered monarch butterfly and have social economical impacts. So in terms of plant biodiversity, they're highly competitive plant species and can outcompete native species for both space, sunlight, and water and nutrients. In addition as well, their high seed production allows them to have quite a prolific seed bank, so they're able to reestablish quite well, but they also are able to spread out easily. They also have allelopathy, so to reduce interspecific competition. So their roots actually emit a biochemical that prevents the growth from other plant species in that area. And in addition, they're also toxic. So insects and other herbivores will avoid dog-strangling vine populations. So for instance, deer will not feed off dog-strangling vine. Rather, they would focus their attention on native species that are more palatable. So now not only is dog-strangling vine outcompeting the native plant species, but you also get an additional pressure from herbivores, which are now focusing on native species. as the dog-strangling vine is inedible to them. And so you can see in this image here, this is a photo taken from the Kentville site. You can see how dense this dog-strangling vine can be. And you can see some of the twining nature of it around some of the plants that are present there. And as the name suggests, strangling them out. So in addition, it also has an impact on the monarch butterfly. So the monarch butterfly in field evidence suggests that they will lay their eggs on dog-strangling vine. However, as we know, the monarch butterfly larvae are relative specialists on milkweed species. And so when they do lay eggs on a dog-strangling vine, the larvae isn't able to develop fully, resulting in death, and then you get a loss in a generation. However, interestingly, lab evidence suggests that monarchs will choose milkweed plants over dog-strangling vine if both are present. So the exact impacts there may not be as severe as previously thought, but nonetheless, dog-strangling vine can outcompete milkweed species. So even if monarchs may not be aptly planting a bunch, laying their eggs, should I say, not planting, laying their eggs on milkweed, the fact that they can outcompete and smother their host species raises a significant threat to the monarch butterfly. So here is a map showing the distribution of dog-strangling vine in North America. You can see a large cluster of it here in Lower Ontario, specifically in the Toronto region. It is very abundant there and it poses a huge issue. And then you can also see some newer dots here that have popped up in New Brunswick. Then we got our populations here in Nova Scotia. So in Nova Scotia, we have 3 known populations of dog-strangling vine. We've got Halifax population, a Wolfville population, and in Kentville. Both the Halifax and Wolfville populations are considered to be under control. The Halifax one is only a couple plant species, 2 or 3, that are growing up between some concrete, and they are routinely pulled down and seed heads removed. So it's considered to be managed and contained in that area. It's similar with the Wolfville population that is also very contained. However, it's a different story with the Kentville population. And this is a priority region of focus as it is not contained in this area and is quite abundant. And so this is designated as a priority region because it's within the Katsputuak region, as also known as the Southwest Nova Scotia Priority Place. And so for those of you who do not know, the priority places are regions within Canada has been designated for extra conservation concern because of whether it be high biodiversity in those areas, as well as species at risk. And so it's located with one of the 11 regions here in Canada. So in terms of management plan, it is a community management plan to tackle this dog-strangling vine in Kentville. And so this involves a lot of public outreach and citizen science. So we're consistently on the ground in Kentville, talking with the community, getting them to engage with the project. Also, this project involves early detection and rapid response. So we're consistently monitoring the population in this area, looking for satellite populations and making sure it's not spreading outwards. Then in terms of control, we have applied really kind of 2 main methods here, this being manual control. Within manual control, there's a few different methods, one being digging/pulling. So this is a manual removal of the dog-strangling vine in the area, making sure to get the roots as this plant species is able to store energy in its roots and can easily regenerate from the roots. So you need to make sure to get the roots when removing this plant species. And also we do some seed pod removal as well. Then in terms of chemical control, this is something new that we've only applied this year, and we'll talk about that in a bit when I talk about what I've done so far this year. And these aren't the only control methods for dog-strangling vine. There are other management practices, such as using a tarp to smother out the population. This hasn't been implemented here in this area, basically because a lot of it is private property, and working with the community may impose some issues there. So we haven't quite gone with the tarping method, as well as there is some biocontrols that can be implemented as well. But these aren't really methods we're considering for this project due to the expenses associated with them. And the final aspect of the management plan is restoration. So hopefully restore it back to the previous ecosystem that was beforehand. But I'll talk a little bit about that when I discuss what we've seen so far in terms of effect. Okay, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Cole. And so he can talk about what he did in the summer 2021.
Thank you, Hughstin, and I have to thank you for taking on the majority of this presentation. My part's just going to be a short little quip, just basically to say what I did so far, or at least last summer. So during the summer of 2021, I went out and visited several property owners and members of the community adjacent to the populations that we wanted to treat. And I basically spoke with them, let them know what we were doing and who we were, and essentially kind of not educated, but let them know exactly what dog-strangling vine and what it can do. And most of the property owners were very pleased and very happy to help as much as they could. I had a couple of guys offer to just rip up one that was right in front of them, and I said, no, don't do that just yet. I also conducted a literature review and monitored the growth and development of some of the plants throughout the season up to a one-day community weed pull, wherein you see one of the volunteers from one of the local Rotary, well, the local Rotary Club, and they actually helped us uproot a lot of the population. You move on to the next slide, Hughstin. And in this slide, let me get to it. Oh, there we go. In this slide, you can see several zones, all different colors, just to signify different levels of risk or exposure. Excuse me, my dog is trying to play. Go. And the blue zones essentially show those areas where we surveyed or investigated and found no dog-strangling vine populations. The yellow zones show those areas where there are a few plants here and there, but it's not a significant priority due to the population size. We want to focus on the red zones, which are the high priority. And that's where the populations were significantly large in 2021, and they needed immediate treatment to prevent any further excursion. And the green zone is an area where we discovered some plants during the community poll, but we weren't able to return to them until this year when Hughstin went in. And don't be surprised if you see a few changes in the blue zone. I mean, sometimes new plants will pop up. It's just the nature of the species. And I'm good to go, Hughstin.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for that. There we go. So yeah, so this here is the population in 2022. And so again, we get the similar color scheme with the blue representing absence, yellow being lower priority, red being high priority. But in addition, now we've got some satellite populations. So these are populations of dog-strangling vine. They're quite small that weren't previously within Cole's region there. So these may have popped up within the year. And so we got a couple that were in the ditch along here in these two areas along the side of this individual's property. And then some here, which is actually in a compost heap. So these are going to be highly targeted by us with this year to try and make sure that the population isn't expanding out anymore. The other interesting thing that I kind of wanted to mention as well is that right here represents a ravine. And so we've been consistently checking along the ravine to make sure it is not traveling along it. And thankfully, we haven't seen any expansion there, so which is really good to see. And yeah, and so here is some images from some of the plots where we're monitoring the growth and looking at it. And so what's really interesting to see is with plot one, so this plot is within the ravine, And so this plot received a lot of the digging and pulling manual weed pull that happened last year. And so we've actually seen a significant reduction there in dog-strangling vine presence. There's a couple plant species that are not species, individuals, a little bit that are larger. So one you can see here, you can notice by the glossy leaves. But for the majority of the ones that are coming back in this area are actually seedlings. So it's nice to see that the efforts that are being put in place to control this species appear to be working. The other interesting part about this is some of you may notice is that now we have another invasive species coming in, and that is garlic mustard. So where the dog-strangling vine has been removed, garlic mustard has taken this open space and is now establishing itself quite abundantly in this area. We also have Rosa multiflora doing the exact same thing, as well as some goutweed. And so while these are other invasive species, it's in a way kind of a good thing, as it's taking over that space where the dog-strangling vine could come back at. And so you've got this competitive pressures between the invasives there, and hopefully it'll help us with the eradication of the dog-strangling vine, as those other three invasives are already super abundant here in Nova Scotia, unlike the dog-strangling vine, which is restricted to those three areas, like I said. And so now if we look over here at plot 5, and so this is a high priority area. It's very dense back here. It hasn't received any management practices in the previous year. And so when I was back there, it in some areas was nearly 100% cover. It was twining up the sumac canopy there to at a point where it was at my chin. So it was over 5 feet high. And in addition as well, there was some growth from previous years that were actually above my head. So it is very abundant back there in this area. And so for the summer, we continued with our outreach with local residents in coordination with municipality. The community there has been great. They've been super helpful, letting us go into their backyards still and look at the plants, as well as discussion with removal and different control methods. So it's awesome seeing the helpfulness from the community. We're continuing monitoring growth and development of plants. So we've got plots lined up in the ravine here, which are the same areas where Cole had his plots. So we can see the change over the years, but we also have some additional plots that have been put in this really dense area. And we'll be hosting another community weed pull this year on Sesame Street on August 13th. So if we need volunteers, so if anyone is interested, please reach out to us. It should be a fun day. If you enjoy manual labor and pulling out plants, but I think it'll be a fun time. So yeah, if you're interested in partaking with it, make sure, please reach out to us. I have our emails there at the end of the slide. And yeah, and so the other thing that we've implemented this year, which is new, is we've sprayed a herbicide in the area. And I'll go back and show you specifically where that was. And so this was a domestic grade herbicide. This just means it's a herbicide that can be purchased from a Canadian tire. You don't need a license to use it. It's not commercial grade. It was applied June 27th, 2022. It had a relatively low glyphosate concentration of 7 grams per liter. And this was only applied in a high priority area where no control methods were previously applied. So it was applied in this area here, well away from any waterways. And when we applied the herbicide, we were very specific to apply only to the dog-strangling vine in that area. And so yeah, so future goals of this project is to continue community involvement with the project. Other goals is to eradicate dog-strangling vine from this area. Hopefully that we'll be able to do that. But if not, at least have it managed and contained to that particular area. Also would like to restore the vegetation with native species. So this may be a challenge, especially in areas where other invasive species are taking over. So we'll see to what extent that will have effectiveness, but it is our goal to eventually replace the vegetation there with a native species. So that before I end our talk here, I just want to talk about the importance of iNaturalist. And as it's a super important tool that we use for monitoring invasive species here in Nova Scotia. So we have a project on iNaturalist. So if you spot any invasive species, it gets automatically included in this project. So far, we have over 22,000 observations of 138 species with just under 3,500 observers. While these values are quite high, it is really nice to see the citizen science out there and people going out there and seeing invasives and reporting them, because it's way better to know if they are there so we can do something about them. And a lot of this data is used for our project. So for instance, I'm currently working on a Phragmites project. And with this project, we first use iNaturalist observations to go and assess where the populations is to basically create our survey route. So yeah, so if you see invasive species, make sure to report it to iNaturalist. Oops. That I want to say thank you for everyone listening, as well as thank you for the invitation to speak today. I want to say as well that if you're interested in becoming a member, please reach out to us. Our emails are right here. I'll keep it up here for a bit if anyone is interested in, so you can have some time to copy them down. You can also sign up for a newsletter by visiting our website at www.nsinvasives.ca. You can also follow us on Twitter and like us on Facebook.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I have to say, love the iNaturalist mention. We're big fans of it here at MTRI as well. Yeah, so thank you so much, Hughstin and Cole. Does anybody have any questions at this point? You can either turn your mic on or type it in the chat there. All right. I have one to start off with as well. When was Dog-Strangling Vine first found in Nova Scotia?
So this so it's been relatively new. I don't remember, Cole might remember the exact date, but I don't quite have the exact year. I know it's relatively new, but this population here is believed to have been actually here for quite a while, just kind of chilling there for a while, and then it was observed as,
I wouldn't have an exact year for the Kentville population. I know that there was two populations. Well, there are two, like Hughstin mentioned. The one in Halifax had been there. It had been recorded, I think, since 2019, I believe. Yeah. But the one in Kentville must have been there for quite a while because it spread so much. So we don't have an exact date, but by how fast that they grow, it might be recent, like last 20 years maybe.
Awesome. Okay, thank you. And we have a hand raised from Ronald Arsenault. If you want to go ahead and ask a question.
Sure. First of all, iNaturalist, you said that there's an invasive species project. Does it automatically harvest the invasive species so that you don't have to join or actively add the species to the project?
No, yeah. So if you report invasive species that's listed within the project, it gets automatically included in it.
Great. Now I have a couple more questions, if I may.
For sure.
At the very beginning of the presentation, you gave us various methods by which invasive species might make their way over here. One thing that I don't know if it wasn't there or if it was probably part of another method that you listed, but I didn't really see it. My understanding is that certain species will get here as, for example, the horticulturalists will bring in a plant and not realizing that there might be an insect pest in there or a disease organism or whatever. Was that included anywhere in your list of things?
Yeah, that was the first one there that I ran to complications. Yeah, so horticultural, a lot of invasive plant species are brought over as horticultural plants or ornamental plants originally, and then they escape, like you said, into the ecosystem where unknowingly they were brought over as.
I wasn't talking about the plant themselves. The plant itself is, let's say the plant itself is okay, but there might have been insect eggs in there.
Yeah.
And that's where I wondered where that was included in your list of methods of import, if you want to use that terminology.
Yeah, no, it's something I didn't quite include there, but definitely that is one potential way how they can get in for sure. For instance, the Asian jumping worm, for instance, is one of those that is found in soil of some plants that were brought over. So yeah, that's another way for sure.
Okay, and now one more thing. I assume that you have a list somewhere of organisms that are considered invasive.
Mm-hmm.
Now, are mallards on that list?
No.
And why not?
I don't really have any particular knowledge in that aspect. I've studied plants as well as insects, so I can't really comment on that. But if you want,
I'm just curious because mallards, to me, they fit your definition of an invasive species. They're not native to this area, and they were released to the tune of 500,000 a year for hunting purposes, which was one of your categories. And to this day, I mean, I just saw a study published in 2019 where they are genetically distinct from the native Western populations. So they were introduced from European birds. And as far as I can tell, anyway, they're displacing at least the native black ducks. So to me, they fit the definition. Yet I've never seen them on a list, probably because they are native to North America, but just not native to this area. Anyway.
Yeah.
That's it for my questions.
Sure. Well, thank you very much.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. Do we have any other questions right off?
I have a question, Morgan.
Absolutely.
First, thank you. Thanks, Hughstin and Cole, for a great presentation and some really great questions as well. And thanks for drawing so much attention to invasives, because, you know, at MTRI, we know that it's a big problem and it's getting harder all the time. I just wondered, with regard to dog-strangling vine, does it have a preferred habitat? Are there places that it doesn't like to grow? And, you know, it looked like it was pretty wooded in some of the pictures. Is it likely to be a threat to our forests? Or does it tend to get shaded out by a thick canopy, for example? Or does it prefer rich soils or poor soils, or wet soils, dry soils, that kind of thing? Or does it just love everywhere?
Yeah, it is definitely a potential threat to forestry, the forest. It gets in the under canopy and, as the name suggests, strangles onto native plants in there. Cole, I don't know if you've, during your literature review, if you came up any particular habitats that it enjoys?
As far as I've seen, it'll grow just about anywhere, but it very much enjoys open areas. And there's a difference between the two species. And this was during the biological control studies. They found that Vincent toxicum nigrum would actually grow. I believe it was Vincent toxicum nigrum. I haven't read it in a little bit, so I might be mistaken by that. It might be vice versa. But one of them, I think it was nigrum, grew better on forest edges, so it liked more light, and it would actually not grow as well in shaded areas, while it was the opposite with rossicum. It would have like not substantially, but just minimally better growth in shaded areas, but they both grew significantly better in open areas. As far as soil richness and whether or not it's wet, no idea. I haven't come across anything like that, but from what I've seen, it likes open areas. So it would like open fields, kind of clear cuts, etc.
Thank you. That's sort of depressing, but thank you.
Awesome. So we have a question in the chat, and it is, are both dog-strangling vine species found in Nova Scotia?
Yes, yeah, both
yeah.
are present, yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry, he's.
Oh, no worries, no worries. Yeah, both are present. The Kentville one is the just coming back here, the black swallowwort, so the darker colored one. So you've got yeah, so there's a photo of it. It's the darker colored flowers.
Awesome. And just kind of branching off that, because you said the Kentville one, do you notice between the different, I guess, sites per se, do you notice that there's usually both species mixed within one site, say the Kentville site, or are they kind of site specific, limited to one per site?
Yeah, they're only limited to each site. So for instance, this one, it's only in that particular area, it is only the black swallowwort that's taking over that area. Yeah,
Awesome.
it's each individual species that's there.
Oh, okay. That's actually super interesting. I mean, invasive species, so kind of tragic, but still super interesting. Awesome. Do we have any other questions? I'm not seeing any right off. So yeah, thank you everyone for the awesome questions. I love questions at the end because it always gives us more room to learn as well. And thank you so much for joining us tonight. Cole and Hughstin, thank you for the amazing presentation, and thank you to our audience as well for joining us tonight. And for anyone interested in joining us next Thursday, July 14th, that will be our second summer seminar. We'll be joined by Keith Egger, a professor emeritus at the University of Northern British Columbia, and he's doing his presentation on if the decline of the eastern hemlock affects mushroom biodiversity. I would like to also thank the Region of Queens for supporting us and our seminar series. As always, you can stay up to date with our seminars by following us on Facebook. And if you would like to rewatch any of our seminars, you can find them on our Facebook Live under our video streams, or you can visit our YouTube channel. And we hope everyone stays well, and we get to see you all again very, very soon. Awesome. So yes, thank you again. That was a super awesome presentation.
Thank you so much for the invite.
Thanks, Morgan.
Awesome. Thank you again.